Hello and welcome to Project Blue Book, Truth, Lies, and Conspiracy. Today's topic wasn't originally planned in advance, as it sort of came about from doing research into last week's video. I was looking at information about the UFOs spotted over the White House in Washington, D.C., and Project Blue Book kept springing up. So it was at that point that I realized this video was long overdue for being made. When it comes to things in the UFO and paranormal world, no single text gets brought up more regularly than Project Blue Book. In fact, it is almost being put on a pedestal as the document to read if you are interested in anything involving UFO sightings. However, I wanted to take a deeper look at these documents and see if everything is as on the up and up as many people think. Spoilers, it isn't. As a side note, if anyone is curious, no, I didn't watch a TV show about it. Not because I didn't want to, but because I kept forgetting it was on. So let's don our best spy gear and see if we can uncover the truth about the supposed holy grail of UFO evidence. Starting off, Project Blue Book was created in 1952 by the United States Air Force in order to study reports of UFO sightings and, more importantly, to determine if there was a threat to national security. These two ideas were the basis of the goals that this at one time secret project was focused on. Even though the project was started by the Air Force, it was strongly intertwined with the CIA as well. It is worth noting at this point that this wasn't the first endeavor into UFO sightings, since studies were done in 1947 under the name SIGN, and again, this was visited with Project Grudge in 1949. So it goes without saying that there was ample enough sightings to warrant the military's attention. Officially, Project Blue Book was ended in January of 1970. However, there are documents stating it continued for a while after that, and others say it is still ongoing under another name. By its official end, the report had amassed over 12,000 UFO reports, of which less than 1% were actually looked into. We will get back to this point in a few minutes. What many aren't aware of is that along with the overwhelming amount of sightings, the main proponent for the project being created was an incident where unexplained craft were seen visually, and more importantly, by radar towers flying over Washington, D.C., which included the White House. So other than the small amount of sightings being looked into, the project seems to be on the up and up, right? As I'm sure you guessed, the answer is not really. Due to so many reports coming in, and for other unknown reasons, on January 14th of 1953, the OSI, or the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, contacted a man named Howard P. Robertson about the reports, and requested he assemble a group of prominent scientists to look into those sightings on file. Howard held many positions with his line of work, including a physician, CIA consultant, and he was the director of the Defense Department Weapons Evaluation Group. Soon he gathered 6 members with credentials ranging as physicists, radar experts, CIA operatives, astronomers, and the like, under the name of the Robertson Panel. One other feature that the entire group had in common was that all members were already skeptics of the UFO phenomenon. Mr. Robertson originally had tasked the Battelle Memorial Institute with inspecting the files, but moved on from them when he pressed for results and the institute stated that they needed more time to conduct a proper study. The Robertson Panel, in its lifetime, convened over a 4-day period for, in total, only 12 hours. That is quite an in-depth study, huh? They looked into the case files for what totaled 3 hours a day. Out of all the sightings that were reported, they looked into 23 of them. During the meetings, everything that went on was written about by a man named Edward Ruppelt, who was at the time captain in the Air Force and was also head of Project Blue Book. In his transcripts, he wrote the panel was shown footage taken from Delbert C. Newhouse, who was the chief warrant officer and naval photographer. With that, 2 naval photographer and film analysts reported that after 1,000 hours of analysis, they felt the films depicted no known aircraft, animal, or weather phenomenon. After this, the panel was shown footage of seagulls. Finally, Major Dewey J. Fortnett personally spoke to the panel about his experience with coordinating UFO affairs for the Pentagon. In his opinion, he stated that he believed that the only explanation for many of the sightings were extraterrestrial in nature. It wasn't long after so many military personnel coming forward with their sightings that it became mandated that any military person who speaks about things dealing with military secrets would face imprisonment and a fine of $10,000. Which that was in 1952, so in today's money it would be a fine of almost $97,000. On the final day, the panel closed and released this statement. The panel concluded unanimously that there was no evidence of a direct threat to national security in the objects cited. They did not find any evidence that related to objects cited as space travelers. Mr. Fournette, in his presentation, showed how he had eliminated each of the known and probable causes of sightings, leaving him extraterrestrial as the only one remaining in many cases. Fournette's background as an aeronautical engineer and technical intelligence officer could not be slighted. However, the panel could not accept any of these cases cited by him because they were raw, unevaluated reports. Terrestrial explanations of the sightings were suggested in some cases, and in others, the time of sighting was so short as to cause suspicion of visual impressions. It was after this release that the Robertson panel advised the Air Force should spend less time analyzing and studying UFO reports and should spend more time flat out debunking them. In their opinion, they said in order to debunk sightings, they needed to use mass media, including Walt Disney Productions. They further stated that psychologists, astronomers, and even celebrities were needed to ridicule sightings and to offer up prosaic explanations. Going one scary step farther, they also instructed the CIA that civilian UFO groups should be watched due to them possibly influencing the mass population's way of thinking. As of such, the Robertson panel was thought to have enacted that last part of the plan, which required spying on the general population. We also see the first two steps frequently, where if the idea of life being out there is presented, it is immediately met with a response or imagery of the person being crazy. It should be stated that the panel was not created with the goals that it had in mind. Granted, their practices were obviously skewed, and even if an alien body were to be brought into the meetings, they would still state it was the mistaken identity of a bird or weather balloon. However, the panel was started by first being told that, and I quote, "The flying saucer situation has national security implications. In the public concern with the phenomenon lies the potential for touching off mass hysteria and panic." This statement was sent to Walter B. Smith, who was the director of the CIA, and it came from the OSI. Yes, the same place that created the Robertson panel. So basically, the panel began with being told that anything you can't explain is a threat to national security. That isn't adding bias or pressure to the results of a study, is it? As a result of this, out of all the sightings in Project Blue Book, it was very rare for any of them to be ruled unexplained. In fact, at one point it came from direct order of General Nathan Twining, who started Project Sign, that Project Blue Book was to keep unidentified crafts to a minimum in its pages. Soon after, the project was still in place, but it served as more of a public relations purpose with a strong debunking order in place. Even as such, it is known that at one time sightings were being investigated, but it quickly turned to being a figurehead with very little serious investigation being done. At one point, Edward Ruppelt, who, as we discussed, was the head of Project Blue Book, was cut down to a staff of himself and two others with little to no funding. Edward soon asked for reassignment, and on March of 1953, Captain Charles Hardin took the lead on PBB. I'm getting tired of saying Project Blue Book. At this point, it could be a drinking game. Captain Hardin was known to feel that anyone who was interested in UFOs were crazy, and the whole idea bored him. Perfect guy for the job, huh? Under his control, he went to trying to reduce the unsolved cases even farther. After him came a man named Captain George T. Gregory in 1956, who was even more so against the idea of UFO sightings than Captain Harding was. Again, he went to reducing the unknown cases, but not by doing more investigations, but by changing the levels of an explanation. If a sighting was given the explanation of it possibly being a bird, it was now upgraded to it being probably being a bird. As a step farther, if something was said to be probably a cloud, it was now written as being positively a misidentified cloud. In 1958, Major Robert J. Friend tried to salvage what was left of PBB, but lack of funds and outside interest stalled him. In fact, due to his new fervor, the Air Force put pressure on to pass the project to a new agency, but was unable to do so. By the time Captain Friend was reassigned from the project in 1963, he stated that the whole thing was now effectively useless and should be dissolved. It should be noted that the Patel Institute did finish their study, being only given 3,200 cases. Their results stated that at least 22% of them would be considered unknown, and another 9% were stated as being unknown but needing more information. This report would later be published as PBB Special Report Number 14 on October of 1955, which the Air Force would twist and state that their findings proved that there weren't any UFOs. PBB didn't get away with their practices for too long, as they were highly and publicly ridiculed for covering up UFO sightings. Much came to light with their practices at investigating sightings and ridiculous explanations, which were made more prominent. On April 17, 1966, two police officers from Ravenna, Ohio, saw a disc-shaped silver object with light coming from below it, flying at around 1,000 feet. They began to follow the object and described it descending to only 50 feet above the ground at times. Other officers became part of the chase, and it lasted for half an hour and covered over 85 miles. PBB directors sent out an investigation party who chose to only interview one of the original officers and no one else. They then made public that what the officers had seen was a satellite, and then they changed it to that they were actually seeing the planet Venus. This story and a military response marked the start of the downfall of PBB. So as you see, after all that, PBB was started with the purpose of handling all the UFO sightings that they were receiving, but it quickly switched to being a cover-up machine. I can't really say that this was truly a conspiracy, since within that term there is a possibility of assumptions being made. However, all of this previous information is known and documented, and aren't in the realm of just seeing a pattern and making a conclusion, or educated guess, if you will. Now, before ending this video, I did want to take a moment to talk about the topic that started this whole search down the rabbit hole, which was the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO sightings. From July 12th to the 29th in 1952, UFO sightings started to pop up all over Washington, D.C. On July 19th, an Army artillery officer named Joseph Giaudet was at his home in Virginia when at 9:30 p.m. he saw a red cigar-shaped object that went over his house. He described the craft as being the size of a DC-7 airplane, had closely placed lights on the side of the craft, and was approximately about 10,000 feet in the air. After a while, the craft returned, and he stated that it turned into a darker red color and headed towards Washington, D.C. 2 hours after this, an air traffic controller named Edward Nugent at Washington National Airport, now known as Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, saw 7 objects appear outside of the city on his radar. Knowing that no flights were planned at that time, nor was their trajectory an established flight path, he reported it to his superior, Harry Barnes, who also saw the odd blips on the radar. Barnes brought in workers to check the radar, and they found it to be working properly. Harry then radioed to other control towers, who they stated they saw the blips on their radar. On top of that, they physically saw a bright light hovering in the sky, and that suddenly took off at an incredible speed. On the runway, a pilot named S.C. Pierman was waiting for the go-ahead to take off when he was told by the tower that they were tracking unknown objects near him. Pierman responded that he had been watching 6 white tailless fast-moving lights for over 14 minutes. Soon other blips showed up on the radar, and when they neared the White House, Harry called Andrews Air Force Base. At first, the base denied seeing any objects, but they were actually tracking the objects as well. Staff Sergeant Charles Davenport reported seeing an orange-red light that would appear to stop and then abruptly change direction and altitude. He claimed that he watched this object do this maneuver quite a few times. At one point, all 3 radar towers were tracking one blip that was directly over another radar tower, and it suddenly vanished on all 3 monitors at the exact same time. F-94 Starfire jets were scrambled to intercept the objects, but moments before they arrived, the unknown craft disappeared. When the jets returned to base to refuel, the objects reappeared. Harry stated that he felt the craft were monitoring their radio communications. On July 26th, a pilot stated that he saw strange lights above his plane, which at that moment the radar towers were tracking more unknown blips. At one point, the strange sightings were seen changing directions suddenly, even going in reverse, and it was estimated that they were reaching a speed of 7,000 miles per hour. 2 more fighter jets were scrambled to chase these new objects, but it suddenly became apparent that they were the ones being intercepted. At one point, one of the pilots radioed back, stating that he saw the ships, but they were all around him, and he asked what he should do. No response was given to his question, as it was stated no one knew what to tell him to do. After a few more sightings, the strange objects disappeared at sunset on July 27th. On July 29th, the Air Force held a press conference at the Pentagon to talk about the sightings. Major General John Samford stated that all sightings were misidentified aerial phenomena such as comets and stars, and also strong temperature inversions in the area caused many of the radar towers strange anomalies. In light of this, Project Blue Book would label the incident as such. However, the United States Weather Bureau disagreed with this, stating that temperature inversions were present frequently in the area and nothing like this has shown up. Not to mention that such phenomenon shows up as a straight line on radar rather than a circular blip. After this explanation was given, it was found that none of the people working in the radar towers agreed with this idea. Edward Ruppelt was greatly involved with trying to get to the bottom of this event. After a few days, Mr. Ruppelt interviewed many of the workers who originally all stated they saw a bright orange light, but this time when asked to describe it, they all stated they were mistaken and it was actually a star. When he checked astronomical charts, there wasn't any bright stars over the station that night. Ruppelt stated that he heard from a good source that the tower men had been persuaded, a bit by their superiors, to claim what they saw was just a star. So as I end this video, I really have to say I enjoyed making this one quite a bit. It has been a long time since I found a topic that has led me down so many twists and turns as this one did. There was so much information to go over that I kept trying to figure out if I should include it or not. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm curious what you think about all of this. Here we are another week, and I have 3 more comments from viewers like you who I enjoyed reading quite a bit. As always, if your comment isn't shown, it doesn't mean I didn't like it, I just had quite a few to choose from. Jay the Phoenix said, "Attention current and future parents. When you teach your kids not to touch this hot stove, remember to teach them not to touch hot UFOs either. Love your videos. So few good paranormal channels on YouTube." Thank you, Jay the Phoenix. I am happy that you view my channel as one of the greats. It really means a lot to me. You are right though. Not touching a hot stove is a valuable lesson, but so many people forget about including the UFO discussion. In all seriousness, there are quite a few encounter stories out there where an individual got burnt from touching one of the craft. Corey Roberts stated, "Another great video and an especially favorite topic of mine. Ben, your channel is getting better and better, and I appreciate the time and effort you put in." Thank you, Corey Roberts. I greatly appreciate that you enjoy my channel and its content. I do thoroughly enjoy making these videos for everyone. Although the one I made about the Illuminati a while back had so much information to go through that I literally got a headache from it. I also love the topics of UFOs and aliens, and after so many videos focusing on cryptids back to back, I've been wanting to make something on that topic for some time now. Finally, we have Sad Sam 727 who said, "I don't know if you're at your voice or how thorough you are, but I just enjoy listening to your videos. For what it's worth, thank you for your effort and time." I appreciate that, Sad Sam 727. For whatever reason you enjoy listening to my videos, I am just happy that you like my channel. I do invest quite a bit of time into my videos, but with comments like these, it makes it well worthwhile. One of my main goals for starting my channel was to upload content that gave fuller stories behind topics, rather than just a footnote in the presentation. This can take a lot of time, but I enjoy it. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for content similar to this, and also, if you enjoyed this, could you share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre? With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one.